Imagine you're a professional musician, a violinist. You're part of a quartet, and you've flown halfway across the world for a big concert in Istanbul. You've prepared, you've rehearsed, you're ready. You walk out on stage, the lights are hot, but the house is cold. There are 3 people in the audience. 3. The band literally outnumbers the crowd. So what do? Do you get angry? Do you phone it in, play the set as fast as possible? I mean, who would blame you? Well, when this actually happened to my guest Jeremy Cohen, he said the choice was clear.
It doesn't really change what we need to do. I think the important thing is that whenever we're playing for an audience, we can change the trajectory of somebody's life by giving ourselves fully as an artist to the task at hand.
That got me thinking, what is that? That feeling, that commitment, that engine? In a creative life that's full of uncertainty and rejection, in a business that's known for pulling every trick in the book, where does that come from? Today on our show, we're looking for the answer. A special episode with 4 stories from our archives that get to the heart of that question. It's a journey that starts with a private spark of magic, builds into a bond on stage, grows into a connection with an audience, and ends up with the weight of a legacy. This is the story of what keeps you going. I'm Vonn Vanier, and this is Beyond the Notes. Stay with us.
Act 1. The Spark.
You know, there are 2 kinds of people at any job, right? There are the people who do exactly what they're told, they stay in their lane, they do their part of the assembly line, and that's it. And then there are the kind of people who always look around the corner. The people who are always thinking about the next step, about the whole machine. That's the first thing you need to know about Grammy-winning sound engineer Leslie Ann Jones. She's the second kind of person. It's a philosophy she's had from day one.
From the time I first started, I always thought about things not from just where I was sitting, but the next stage up. So when I was an assistant engineer, I thought a lot about, I try to think a lot like the engineer. So to try and anticipate what the engineer might need in terms of, a different microphone or something like that, or paying attention to what the artists were saying. Maybe their headphones weren't sounding right, or something like that. And when I was an engineer, then I started thinking like the producer, especially in the age of analog, where you would know, you'd sort of have to recognize places where you could start and stop and places where you might have to edit. And so if you waited until you were done and then you started searching for stuff, then you've waited too long. So I would really try and think like the person whose job was next. And that allowed the recording sessions to move a lot faster, and for me to be able to anticipate what people wanted.
Think like the person whose job was next. It's such a simple idea, but it's a profound one. So what does that actually look like in the real world? What happens when you have that mindset and then you run into a problem? Well, one day, a Dixieland band was in the studio and they ran into a problem.
I remember when I was at the Automat, which is a studio. It was a studio here in the Bay Area that no longer exists. I was recording a kind of a Dixieland big band from the Sacramento area, and they blew the ending of a take, and so they were going to do the whole take again. And I said, well, no, why don't we just, back up 16 measures and just start playing and play to the end and do the end right, and I'll edit it together. That concept was completely foreign to them, And so we recorded the ending, and it was perfect. And I got the two together, and they came in and heard it, and they were just astounded. So I suppose that, of anything, made me feel like a sonic wizard.
And you hear that story and you understand. That's the spark. That's the feeling. It's not just about being clever. It's the feeling of having a real, tangible impact, of seeing that look on the band's face when you've done something they thought was impossible. And for Leslie, that feeling would end up changing everything. She had originally planned a different career path entirely, but after moments like that, where she could physically shape the sound, she realized where she truly belonged.
Well, when I started, I wanted to be a music producer and a manager. I very much admired Peter Asher, who was managing and producing James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt, and I thought, well, that would be really a great sort of right brain, left brain job. You could produce an artist in the studio, and then you could manage them to make sure that, everything you've done and all the fruits of your labor actually get, out there and are treated well. But, you know, the more I got involved on the technical side of engineering, and the more I understood sort of being in the room with really great uh, producers, that I definitely gravitated much toward more towards the engineering side, and I felt that I could really sort of, shape the sound of what people were doing and have quite a big impact on what they were doing as well. So, I suppose somewhere along the line, I felt that that was the path forward.
Act 2, The Bond.
So you have that spark, that private feeling of magic. But a spark in one person isn't a fire. And this is where things get really hard, because a quartet is a strange and beautiful thing. It's four soloists, four virtuosos, each with their own ideas, their own instincts, who have all agreed to pretend they're not the main character. So how does that even work? How do you get four people who are trained to stand out to blend into one? I asked violinist Jeremy Cohen, the founder of Quartet San Francisco, about that. And he said it's a very simple shared mission.
Well, if they love this, why don't we just play things for string quartet that we love, and then we can be fully invested, because aside from it being a job and aside from us living in a society where people have to buy food, pay rent, and drive a car and pay insurance, we got into the music world not for those reasons. We got into the music world because we found a place for expressivity, if I'm making up a word, for expression, for the connection, for the social connection between us and our colleagues playing together.
Okay, so that's the big idea, a shared passion. But how does that work in practice on a Tuesday in a stuffy rehearsal room when two of you feel a phrase completely differently? What's the tactical solution to the problem of ego? Well, it turns out it's kind of a radical democracy, a belief that for the group to be powerful, every single member has to feel powerful.
Every player has to feel, for the group to be successful, every player has to feel that their voice is a critical part of what makes the quartet music good. I say in Quartet San Francisco, at one point or another in every piece, everybody is the first violinist. The distribution of material around the quartet has everybody looking out for certain parts of the piece where their voice is going to be the most critical voice. And how do we make sure that the others know to make space for that voice at that time so it happens seamlessly?
So you have these two ideas, a shared passion and a radical respect for each other's voices. But a philosophy isn't just a philosophy until it gets tested. And the real world test isn't what you do in a sold out stadium when the energy is easy. It's what you do when there's almost no one watching.
He didn't put out the word, so it turns out there were 4 of us on stage and 3 for a while in the audience. I think it ended up being 5 or 6 by the end of the concert, but it started with 3. What do I learn from that? It doesn't really change what we need to do. I think the important thing is that whenever we're playing for an audience, we can change the trajectory of somebody's life by giving ourselves fully as an artist to the task at hand.
It doesn't really change what we need to do. You hear that and you understand. This is what all that work, all that trust is for. It's not just a way to play together. It's a kind of armor. It's what allows them in that moment on stage to forget everything else. The empty seats, the long flight, the fear of making a mistake, and just do what they came to do. Which, when Jeremy describes it, sounds a lot like flying.
I say, I don't care about mistakes. Don't play careful. Play like it's your last concert. Give it everything you have. It matters. We work in an environment where we spend time talking, we spend time playing, and when we go to concert, we spend time flying. Period.
Act 3. The Connection.
And that's the feeling, isn't it? The moment a group of musicians on stage takes flight. It's a collective. It's a kind of in-the-moment magic. But there's this whole other side to the story. The composer, a quieter, more solitary journey. And for a composer like Peter Boyer, after decades of work, a certain kind of reputation is built. You become the person who gets called when the subject is America. When the stakes aren't just about a new piece of music, but about capturing a piece of national history.
Was actually a phone call completely out of the blue from Kathy Cahill, the president and CEO of the Mann Center. It was in the summer of 2022. I hadn't talked to her for a long time. And I just got a call and she very excitedly started saying, we're going to have this amazing thing and it's going to be, almost 4 years from now. It's for our 50th anniversary. We have this great idea. And she was very excited about it. And she said, we want you to write it. Will you write it? I mean, it was just like, whoa, okay.
And this is the thing about that kind of success. The responsibility is immense. It's no longer just about writing a good piece, it's about honoring a legacy. In that kind of pressure, it only gets heavier. When Peter got another one of those calls, this one from the Kennedy Center for a piece celebrating America's 250th anniversary, he was already completely booked. But the opportunity was monumental. The reality was a logistics nightmare. And the only way to solve a problem of that scale wasn't a business strategy. It was a creative breakthrough from acclaimed photographer and collaborator Joe Sohm.
So part of what made this project so interesting is that Joe's idea was, well, rather than completely write this new piece, which we ended up calling American Mosaic, from scratch, why don't we do, and he called it, this was his term, which I think is kind of funny, make it Peter Boyer's greatest hits. And let's take, chunks from multiple existing works of yours, but repurpose them and let me, Joe, build my images, edit my images to these pre-existing pieces so that we can have this process of creating chunk sections that are going to help us build a big piece. And then, of course, write some new music and adapt and connect and weave together these pre-existing materials. So that actually was a fantastic idea, and it made it more possible for me to do this project while simultaneously writing a completely new, huge piece for the Mann Center for Philadelphia.
And you hear that, and you realize something. This isn't a story about a composer being saved. It's a story about what collaboration looks like at the highest level. It's a creative partner seeing a different angle, a smarter path. It proves that the friends part of the business isn't just about camaraderie. At this level, it's a strategy. It's how the impossible gets done. Which brings us to our final question. Why do it? Why take on these massive history-making projects? What's the real payoff? And the answer? It gets right at the heart of what keeps you going.
I mean, one of the great things about being a composer, and certainly one of the great things about having pieces like this commissioned, is you have an opportunity, I have an opportunity to uplift people in front of me, people who will come and see this thing, pay money, sit down, and get an experience of something that I've worked for months or even years to create. I have an opportunity through this incredible vessel of the orchestra and of the conductor and of the choir and the video, to connect with people in a way that can give them an experience that they won't be able to have anywhere else. And certainly, I can tell you, I mean, through many of my pieces, but especially through Ellis Island, The Dream of America, that's had so many performances by so many orchestras in so many places. I know that I've been able to actually touch people and give them emotional and meaningful and uplifting experiences. So, what's better than that? That's the greatest thing. That's the best thing. So that is the ultimate sort of gratification at the end of a process that can be very long and very tiring and very arduous. That's a payoff for me.
Act 4. The Legacy.
There's a visit you have to make at some point, right? The one to say goodbye. The one where you walk into a quiet hospital room and try to find the right words to thank someone who's changed your life without falling apart. When producer John Snyder went to see his mentor for the last time, he was walking into that room. And to understand fully the weight of that moment, you have to understand who John Hammond was. He is more responsible for the sound of the 20th century than almost anybody else. He found Billie Holiday singing in a club in Harlem. He found Count Basie on a late-night radio broadcast. He signed Bob Dylan when everyone else passed, and Aretha Franklin, and Leonard Cohen. He signed Stevie Ray Vaughan when he was playing in a hotel lobby. He signed Bruce Springsteen. He mentored my guest, John Snyder. That's why Snyder was at that hospital that day, to say goodbye.
When he was dying, I went to see him, and he made me come up to his bed, and because we were talking politics, because that's what he liked to talk about, and I had to leave. His nurses were telling me I had to go, and so Mr. Hammond, I have to leave now. And I stood up, and he come over here, so I stepped up. And he said, "No, come closer." And I kept, "John, come up to my bed, will you?" And so I got right up to his bed. He grabs me by the arm, and he says, "It's up to you now." And I walked home from there to New York thinking, I cannot do that. I cannot do that. That is not me. I cannot do that. But he just said it. He just said, "Well, what do I, now what?"
It's up to you now. And you can hear in John's voice, he couldn't understand it that night. Why him? That's the great thing about mentors. They can see in us what we can't yet see in ourselves. And in John, Hammond saw a champion. The truth is, Snyder had been championing artists' rights for decades by that point. That's a complicated way of saying that he cared, like for real. And he has the story that shows exactly what that looks like. It's about the jazz legend Ornette Coleman. And to understand Ornette, you have to know he was a true genius, a complete iconoclast who invented his own complete system for music. It has a name, harmolodics. And that kind of artist who thinks on that level, they're not always concerned with the day-to-day things like paying the bills on time. He was a pure artist, and he was in trouble.
And I picked Ornette up at the airport, and when he came in, I mean, that's a long story, but we got to be friends, and he kind of latched on to me because I was eager, and I also was worked, and I was kind of smart, and I'm a lawyer, and so he had so many legal problems. As soon as I got to know him, it was almost like, oh my God. And so I was able to help him save his law he was going to lose it because of various reasons. And I went to court and got a 30-day, they were coming to get him, man. And so we got to be friends. And he taught me a lot. He taught me I'm not the same person because he changed everything. And so that was difficult. and then we did have to, we had to sell the place. And then I had to get him a place to live. And then I got him a tour of Europe. And then that was with Kafleur. I mean, it's like it was, but we got it, we did it. I ended up losing a ton of money, but whatever. And, you know, I was helping him get his life together. He was a great artist who was not being treated that way. I mean, it was phenomenal to me. Even the racism alone was like overwhelming. And I saw it personally because I was a white guy in a black community. And so I saw it. And it was like, whoa, man, this is deep. And so, you know, I helped Ornette uh, as much as I could.
And when you hear that story, it all clicks into place. That's what Hammond saw. That's the proof. A person willing to lose his own money to protect an uncompromising artist. And it makes you ask a final question. What's the deep core belief that makes you do that? What's the philosophy that drives those kind of actions? Well, it turns out it's a belief in what music is actually for.
You know, you got to go out there with purpose. You have a message that needs to be heard, and you have to continue to deliver it. And you want to see some feedback. The value exchange of music is not just culture and commerce, it's empathy. And the more of that, the more people care about each other through the exchange of creative work. If you want somebody to hear your music, you're going to have to give some thought to them, care about them to some way, in some way. They need to hear this. And so that's what creates this empathetic exchange. And I think that creates community. That community creates peace. We need more of this in the world that we're living in today, which is not a peaceful world.
And that's the answer, isn't it? To the quiet question, how do you survive? You survive because of a spark of magic in a studio, and because of a bond you form on stage, and because of the trust you earn from an audience. And because someone, somewhere, who saw that you cared for real, grabbed you by the arm and told you it was up to you now. You survive the business because you remember that it's not about the business at all. My thanks to Leslie Ann Jones, Jeremy Cohen, Peter Boyer, and John Snyder for sharing their stories with us. You can hear my full conversations with all of them on our YouTube channel or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. I'm Vonn Vanier, and you've been listening to Beyond the Notes. Thank you very much. One last thing. So let's be honest. When you think of opera, what comes to mind? Probably not something you'd call fun, and probably not something you'd associate with Gen Z. But what if it was your entire job to change that? To take this massive, centuries-old art form and make it exciting and relevant and fun for a generation that grew up on 15-second videos. In just 2 weeks, on October 28th, my guest is Matthew Schilbach. He's the director of the San Francisco Opera, and that's his exact mission. We talk about how you get someone who loves TikTok to give 3 hours to Wagner. It's a fascinating conversation. I hope you'll join us.